Hello, welcome to Psyched Minds. If you have not subscribed yet, do subscribe to the channel, like and share if you like. We are reading In Therapy by Susie Orbach. Third case, page number 44, Harriet. I've been seeing Harriet for 6 months. She has recently separated from her long term partner and has moved out of their shared home. Harriet came to the UK from Zimbabwe when she was a little girl. She works in a primary school as the school secretary. She comes in bundled up from the cold, a maroon and yellow swirly scarf, nearly as big as her, wrapped around her neck, covering her dark blue coat. She feels very small as she sits forward in middle of the sofa. There aren't many words in the session, but it feels to me as though we are connected through the active quiet we hold together. We are not at a loss with each other or separated by the quiet. The quiet is full of feelings, which the session explores. Susie. Hello. Harriet. I'm a bit slow to get started these days. I'm sorry to have been late. God, it's cold. I'm just going to be still for a moment. Is that okay? Long pause. I feel as if I don't know why I'm here today. My pause matches hers. Susie. Uh huh. Harriet. Well, I feel as if I could have. No, I was thinking about not turning up, but then. Oh, sod it. Yeah, I thought it's too late to change my mind. I made the commitment. Wry laugh. How was your Christmas? Tell me about Susie. Tell me about yours. Harriet. Quiet. It was quiet. I didn't want anyone around me, but my sister and my nephew came on Christmas Eve. That was lovely. It was good. And then there was a point when I really wanted to them to go. Susie. Uh huh. Harriet. Yeah. Long pause. Susie. Because you needed to return to and be with yourself. Harriet. Yeah. Pause. Susie. Sad or maybe depleted? Harriet. Of course. Pause. Everything has changed. Everything has changed so much in such a short time. I wanted to be on my own. That was good. That was good. That was right. I am on my own for the first time in such a long time, and the idea of trying to show face, keep up, seem all Christmassy, jolly, no, I couldn't. I didn't want to do it. I did have invites, and that was lovely. I was pleased about that. Sorry. I don't know what Harriet is saying sorry for, but I sense that if I ask, I will be interrupting. Harriet. Oh, and I hate saying sorry all the time. I hate saying sorry. Long pause. How did I get here? That's what I've been thinking about the last few weeks, Susie. I'm haunted by a sense that one makes a decision and then a path opens up from that decision. Everything I have been born with, grown up with, aspirations, hopes, oh, it's all gone askew. It sounds so naff, doesn't it? It sounds so naff. The words aren't conveying the emotional dejection Harriet is transmitting, so I try to give her some. Susie. You're heartbroken and bewildered and lost, and it is going to hurt like hell and be incredibly confusing. Harriet, crying with desperation. How long is it going to take? How long is it going to take? Harriet is in shock. She's slowly trying to assimilate a loss that can't find a place in her mind, a loss that doesn't want to be true. She doesn't know how she got to where she is. She's in a state of grief where it is hard for her to be with people and genuinely present for more than a few minutes. Harriet needs to be heard, by which I mean she needs her experience validated by herself, by me. She is aching to be understood so that she can understand herself and what has happened. She needs somebody with her, who can bear to go with into the horror and the bleakness she feels. Her sorrow touches me deeply. Harriet. I don't understand what I did wrong. I don't understand. Maybe I took too long trying to have a child. Maybe I took too long. Maybe I enjoyed myself too much. I'm 46 years old and I don't understand what on earth is going on. If you had asked me 10 years ago, everything was brilliant. I could see forward. Right now, everything is just pause. Susie, well, things are blocked and frozen. Harriet, I don't understand how to get out of it. I don't like this feeling. Susie, tell me, what is this feeling? Because when I said blocked and frozen, you put your hand in front of your mouth. I'm always observing and at the same time almost experiencing a modified version of what the person I am working with is conveying. In order to be with Harriet in the pain she finds herself in, I take on, in a minuscule way, for the first we are together, for the first time, for the time we are together, the flavor of her pain. This is a form of empathic identification which inevitably occurs for the therapist. Being a therapist is a peculiar activity because a part of oneself is highly emotionally open, almost relaxed as one reflects on what is being said and how it is being said and the way in which feelings are expressed. Simultaneously, we are feeling ourselves in our patient's shoes as we dwell with them in their pain and confusion. And so, without knowing it, I have noticed Harriet's hand in front of her mouth. A part of me recognizes the conflict she is experiencing between wanting to express herself and wanting to stop her words. My question to her about her hand in front of her mouth is thus not thought out, it is spontaneous and curious. Her physical presence in the session is characterized by a kind of folding in on herself. She looks quite tiny, sitting on the sofa, but she isn't a small woman. The image that comes to me is that of a hibernating dormouse, hiding herself away until she can emerge from her frozen winter. When I tell her about her hand gesture, she looks up at me. Harriet, a little laugh. I can see that now you have pointed it out. I am very aware that I do that now because I feel if I don't hold it back, it is going to be an avalanche. It is going to be huge, and I'm scared of that. Harriet fears being overwhelmed. On the one hand, she needs stillness, and on the other hand, she needs words around her experience and the devastation she is feeling. Harriet and her partner had had 2 rounds of IVF. They were both unsuccessful, and she left the home they had lived in together for 6 years. Susie, you didn't know that you weren't able to conceive? Harriet, no. Susie, in facing that, in coming to terms with that, the theft of a future, the theft of being able to carry a baby. Harriet sobs, what do I do? Susie, well, it's double loss, isn't it, Harriet? Because you are dealing with the loss of your partner too, so you are very much at sea. I don't address Harriet's questions directly. I know that it is unanswerable. My job is to find a way to help her live through this anguish. People wonder how something unbearable and unanswerable moves to become accepted, albeit a bumpy accepted. What therapists observe in their practice is that the more space there is for the expression of the complex feelings that such an event throws up, more the capacity for mourning and loss can occur. Loss is not a full stop. It is important to recognize and experience because in time the loss itself can move from being a present terror to sadness that can be lived with. Outside the therapy room, people may wish to jolly Harriet along or avoid her pain or be extra careful not to bring up the loss she has experienced. This is all done out of compassion and caring. But it hasn't helped and doesn't help, Harriet. Harriet. But I am not the only one. I know it happens to so many people. I know that, and I wasn't stupid going into it. The treatment, I wasn't stupid, but God, I was hopeful. Susie. Huh. Harriet. So I'm finding it very hard to look at you today. Susie. Uh-huh. Harriet. How do you think I'm doing in terms of managing all of this? It's not strange, is it? Susie. I think it is very strange for you to find yourself in this situation and very painful. And also, I don't know if there is some sense of shame that you are carrying. Harriet. Yes, I do feel terrible shame. It is almost like I was smelling shame. People communicate the subtlety of that their feelings and the therapists are trained to catch them. It was only a whisper, but it came through to me. The clinical situation with its frame by frame speed slows down and reveals what otherwise can go unheard, unseen, or unfelt. And so it was with Harriet's shame. I think about her shame as being injurious to her sense of self. It is as though the shame comes in to protect her from the hurt that is in every one of her pores. When you are drenched in shame, it stops other kinds of thinking and feeling. You are in a closed loop where it is hard to release the sorrows. But what will allow Harriet to live with meaning beyond this loss will be an ability to experience and then digest her pain, not be defended against it by shame. Feelings are central to the work of psychological change. Feelings seem so ordinary and yet they can give us the biggest problems if we can't engage with them. When we misperceive what we feel, which Harriet experiences as shame, which can easily be stimulated and which doesn't seem to dissipate, when we might ask, is shame a cover feeling, as we saw it with Douglas and anger, a feeling that the individual is accustomed to experience, ever available to be stirred up, and yet one that once felt fails to relieve the individual? If we probe, we may be able to enable a wider spectrum of feeling, such as disappointment, sadness, hurt, loneliness, fragility. Such feelings, once experienced, may move the individual who is stuck. Enabling and receiving the complexity of feelings and turning into them accurately allows them to change as much as interpreting unconscious ideas. Susie, it was a sense I felt when you said you couldn't look at me, and I was trying to understand the difficulty of you seeing me see your pain. The thought, the tough thing is, you just didn't get pregnant, and that you are not responsible for. It is just absolutely awful, and I think it can be quite difficult to hold on to that awfulness, and so you might go into shame, or it's my fault when it just is. Harriet, crying. It is my fault. I'm 46 years old and I don't know whether I can afford to pay you next time, and I can't. I don't know where I am going to be living in the next week. I don't understand. How did I get here? And don't want to be a victim. I don't feel as if. Susie, okay, you are in a really bad spot. You chose to leave. You did it in a way. Harriet's shame had closed her thinking down. She's ashamed by the idea of being a victim, of being poor, of being in an unstable housing situation. She's alone, she's isolating herself, and she's stuck. Harriet, I couldn't stay. Susie, okay, you couldn't stay, but actually that was also your home. Harriet, oh, it was so too sad. It was too sad. It was too sad. I couldn't bear myself around him. He never got angry. He never got angry. Waiting to see his sadness was so overwhelming. His sadness was so overwhelming. I'm thinking about his pain, about how his pain was unbearable for Harriet because it also augmented her own pain. But knowing some of her background, I am also thinking of a curious parallel experience which she has enacted from her earlier life. She left her partner after 6 years following the failure of the second round of IVF. This mirrors an earlier departure when she came to the UK from southern Africa with her mother at the age of 6. Her father stayed behind. This leads me to reflect on departures and the suddenness of a rupture, and the impossibility for her of feeling she has the power to remake her relationship. She has exiled herself from her flat, from her partner with whom she suffered the loss of the promise of a baby and hence the future they had envisioned. Harriet, this feels like an indulgence. Susie, but you know what comes across as so poignant is the two of you sobbing inside in your deep anguish but not able to speak. When your dreams collapsed, you both went into a silo, or you went into a silo. The hurt caused you shame, and that makes sense of why you can't really be around people for very much time now. I'm trying to get a counter rhythm into the flow between us, not to stop Harriet's horror, but to play another tune alongside it. A tune that interrupts the doom, inevitable, closed down quality of the decision she made to leave her flat and partner. Harriet, yeah. Susie, and I wonder whether you also feel an embarrassment that you don't think you can pay to come. Harriet, that's my point. I need to come, but I have so little. Susie, that you feel that you don't have things to give. Harriet, I don't. I feel awful about that. I can't believe right now. I don't know how I am going to balance things in the next month. That's the reason. I didn't think I was going to come today, but then I went. Well, you have booked in, you have to pay. If you don't go, you still have to pay. Susie, you made a certain set of choices in extremis, didn't you? And now you're thinking about those and their impact on you? Harriet. Yeah. Susie. And one of those is financial. It's not the only thing, but I think maybe it is time to reconsider. That's what you say. How did I get here? How did I do this? How did this happen? That's where we are looking at. And I think we will have to just put the financial bit between us on the end on the side for the moment. Harriet. I don't want to be owing. I don't want to be beholden. Susie. No, I wouldn't do it that way. I don't think that would work. We need to agree that there is an amount that you could manage, and that is what you will pay because I also don't want you to be in an owing situation. I don't think that would be right. Harriet, whispering. Thank you. Thank you. Susie, will you think about what is plausible, honestly? Harriet, honestly, I will. Susie, and I will see you next Tuesday? Harriet, okay. I am thinking about how things that are incomprehensible can make an individual feel quite helpless, and the psyche doesn't like feeling helpless. We would rather make ourselves responsible. We would rather change everything around to make ourselves the center of our own misfortune. That then becomes a way of understanding. It also is the magical lever used in everyday thought. If only I had never started. I wouldn't be. If only I had studied, I could have got an A. We can either find that we blame ourselves or we can blame others and see things as their fault. Both those propositions keep people stuck. Therapy can sidestep these two positions. It's a place to explore all the losses, the things gone wrong, the long held anguishes, but it is not a place just to hide. It is a place to lift off the blame to see how Harriet has handled what has occurred. It is a place for her to think and feel whether she has more options than the shamed sorriness. In time, it will be a place for her to re engage with her relationship with her boyfriend and to see whether she and he want to remake it, to see too whether the abruptness of the departure, which was driven by the horror of the pain she felt herself and saw in her partner, can be managed differently, and to consider whether her leaving was a kind of imprint from her childhood separation, a behavior which she can now give up. The sadness may not disappear, but it is something they both experienced and perhaps can support each other through. They wanted to make a family together. That desire was an expression of their love. Remaking that love in the face of their shared and separate loss could be a part of a deep, renewed coming together pain. Harriet's departure from Zimbabwe was not something she could understand. She was a little girl who obviously wasn't in control of it, and not much was explained to her. She lost the smell of her early childhood. She lost the scenery of her childhood. She lost the customs of the town she came from. She lost her extended family. She lost contact with her father too. I'm aware of the way she phrases things. How did I get here? And that's what I have been thinking about the last few weeks, that sense that one makes a decision and then a path opens up from that decision. She also says, I don't understand what I did wrong. I don't understand. These words strike me as the sense of bewilderment that accompanied part of her childhood. How did I get here? I don't understand what I did wrong. I don't understand. They are a refrain of incomprehension of what could not and cannot be explained. Harriet's sense of helplessness is an example of a phenomena we humans struggle with. We don't like to be helpless, and yet her sense of being helpless is real and physically accurate. It throws her back to an early helplessness, also real but unexplained, to a 6-year-old that must have seemed inexplicable. So her feeling of helplessness is not a neurotic feeling to run away from, it is a difficult feeling to accept. But acceptance is what will, in time, help. Much of the time, we want to order and classify our world. We plan and strategize, we analyze and count. We find comfort in binaries such as good or bad, excluded or included, friend or foe, right or wrong. Cultures vary in what is designated in the binary, but the existence of these classifications, this splitting of experience into black and white, is ubiquitous. Harriet is feeling the intensity of the sad feeling that makes absolute sense. So do the feelings of helplessness, which we as a culture have difficulty accepting. I am raising issues of categorization and complexity not in relation to her feeling but in relation to her defenses, shielding other feelings. Defenses try to protect one, but in doing so, they throw up other feelings which are powerful deterrents against engaging with more fundamental feelings. In her case, tolerating her sense of helplessness. From the psychoanalyst perspective, the splitting categorizing mechanism can also be thought of as developmental. Developing minds feel safer with bad things stored outside of themselves, projected onto malevolent characters such as those we encounter in fairy tales, and as children order their world, the the allowed, the not allowed, and the attribution of difference forms a mental picture of how the world is. It is a way of ordering the world and a way of trying to control it. Gradually, the child begins to recognize that other minds exist and they think and feel differently. Not worse than, but not better than, just differently. This development is both troublesome and exciting to the child as she or he begins to navigate opinions and desires that are personal and idiosyncratic. If all goes well, the child's expression of her pain, of her or his opinions and desires will be welcomed, and a confidence will emerge that underpins the sense of being both attached to others while having a sense of one's own being. This separated attachment idea depends on being sufficiently securely attached in the first instance. If that has not occurred, if those who raise us have not had us in mind as a separate person who is simultaneously vulnerable and dependent, then the sense of self that develops may feel insecure. A search for certainties will ensure, as well as a form of thinking that is caught up in good and bad, in and out, them and us, and so on until new relationships in therapy, friendship, or love relationships provide for what attachment researchers and therapists called earned security. Psychoanalysis and psychological theories of development see the capacity to hold complexity in mind, which is to say, when thinking is not arranged in vanishing binaries as a hallmark of psychological selfhood. This is not to say that right and wrong are not useful categories, but they are not uniformly useful category. They pertain to certain situations, ethics, morality, and so on, but in the realms of emotions and often in politics, oversimplification is a detriment. It diminishes our capacity to hear another. It dilutes the richness of our inner life and opinions. It weakens our resilience and it flattens public discourse. Complexity is essential to thought. There is rarely one story, one subjectivity, one way to look at and evaluate things. A psychoanalyst is always thinking about the backstory of the person sitting with them. So before we leave Harriet, I would be asking myself, what were the family in Zimbabwe responding to when they made the decision for Harriet, her siblings, and her mother to leave? What were the political, social, and psychological conditions which came to make the decision? Beyond that, how did the consequences of emigration and immigration and the loss of family play psychologically for Harriet's mother and father and grandparents? How did Harriet's mother cope with her disrupted life, and did she convey to Harriet about loss? Was it unspeakable? Disastrous? How did her mother deal with being transplanted to a new country? Did Harriet experience her first double loss when she arrived in the UK, bereft of her father and wider family, and with a mother who too would have been bewildered and possible preoccupied as she made a new life? And how did the smaller family unit find pleasures, and were they acknowledged? I am spelling this out because complexity and category making are the dialectical prerequisites of being human. We all struggle with the tension between the two poles of cushioning and certainty. Out of that tension comes enormous creativity. Hmm, food for thought. Okay, that brings us to the end of our case on Harriet. We'll be going through with the other case, the next case of Helen in the next reading. Bye bye for now. If you have any queries, any suggestions, any comment, feedback, anything at all, you can reach out to me in the comment section of the video you're viewing or in the community section of the YouTube channel. Bye bye for now. I will end the stream and reading.